The whistle cut through the darkness like a silver thread, haunting and clear, and Yates Vaughn pulled his horse to a sudden stop on the dusty trail outside Silver Creek, Nevada, listening to that melody that seemed to reach into his chest and squeeze his heart. It was 1878, late October, and the air had that bite to it that warned of winter coming down from the mountains. He had been riding for 3 days straight, tracking a lead on work at the silver mines, but that whistle made him forget everything else. It was not a tune he recognized, but it carried something in it that spoke of loneliness and courage mixed together in equal measure. He dismounted carefully, leading his bay gelding off the main trail toward where the sound seemed to be coming from. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to see by, and as he rounded a cluster of Joshua trees, he spotted her. She was sitting on a rock formation about 50 yards ahead, her silhouette small against the vast Nevada sky, and she was whistling that beautiful, mournful tune into the night as if she was calling to someone who might never answer. Yates approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he got closer, he could make out more details. She wore a simple gray dress that had seen better days, and her dark hair hung loose down her back, stirring slightly in the night breeze. She had a worn traveling bag at her feet and no horse in sight, which meant she was either lost or in serious trouble out here alone. "Excuse me, miss," he called out when he was about 20 feet away, pitching his voice to be gentle but clear. She stopped whistling immediately and spun around, her hand going to something at her waist. In the moonlight, he could see it was a small knife, hardly enough to defend herself against much of anything, but he admired her spirit. "I do not mean you any harm," he said quickly, raising both hands to show they were empty. "I was riding past and heard your whistle. Are you all right?" She studied him for a long moment, her eyes trying to make out his features in the darkness. Finally, she lowered the knife slightly but did not put it away. "I am managing," she said, and her voice had a tremor in it that told him she was not managing at all. "You are a long way from town," Yates said, keeping his distance, "and it is not safe to be out here alone at night. There are mountain lions in these parts, not to mention other dangers." "I am aware of the dangers," she replied, and now he could hear the exhaustion beneath the defiance. "But I had no choice. I had to leave town quickly and I could not afford a horse." Yates frowned, concern replacing his initial curiosity. "What happened? Are you running from someone?" She hesitated, clearly weighing whether to trust him. He could see her shoulders sag as if the weight of her situation was too heavy to carry alone any longer. "My name is Grace Fairfield," she said quietly. "And yes, I suppose I am running. My stepfather tried to force me into a marriage with a man 3 times my age who already buried 2 wives. When I refused, he locked me in my room and said the wedding would happen whether I agreed or not. I climbed out the window tonight and started walking. I have been walking for hours." The story came out in a rush, and Yates felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of anyone forcing this young woman into such a situation. She could not have been more than 20 or 21 at most, and the fear in her voice was real. "How old are you, Miss Fairfield?" he asked, needing to understand the full picture. 20, she said. "Old enough to make my own decisions, but my stepfather does not see it that way. He sees me as property to be traded for business connections." Yates nodded slowly. "Well, Miss Fairfield, I am Yates Vaughn, and I give you my word that I will not let anyone force you into anything you do not want. But you cannot stay out here. Will you let me take you back to Silver Creek? There is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is a good woman, and she will give you a room and help you figure out your next steps." Grace looked at him with such hope and suspicion mixed together that it nearly broke his heart. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." Your song guided me here, Yates said simply. That whistle of yours, it cut right through the dark and led me straight to you. Seemed like maybe you needed finding. Now let me guide you somewhere safe. She stared at him for another long moment, then slowly put the knife back in its sheath at her waist. All right, she whispered. I do not have much choice but to trust you, but if you try anything improper, I will scream loud enough to wake the dead. Fair enough, Yates said with a small smile. He walked back to his horse and led it over to where she stood. Can you ride? Yes, Grace said, standing up and brushing off her skirts. She picked up her bag, which looked pitifully light. Everything she owned in the world was probably in that small satchel. Yates mounted first, then reached down to help her up behind him. She hesitated only a second before taking his hand. Her fingers were cold, and he could feel them trembling as she settled herself on the horse behind him, her bag clutched in one arm while the other held onto his jacket. It is about an hour's ride back to town, he told her over his shoulder. Try to relax. My horse is steady, and I promise I will get you there safely. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes, the only sounds the steady clop of hooves on the hard, packed earth, and the occasional call of a night bird. Yates was acutely aware of Grace behind him, of how she held herself stiff and alert, ready to bolt at any sign of danger. Gradually, though, he felt her begin to relax, her grip on his jacket loosening slightly, her breathing becoming more even. That song you were whistling, he said after a while, wanting to break the silence but also genuinely curious. Where did you learn it? There was a pause before she answered. I made it up, she said quietly. I do that sometimes when I am scared or lonely. I whistle to keep the darkness from feeling so heavy. My mother used to sing to me when I was little before she died. I cannot remember her songs anymore, but I remember how they made me feel safe. So I whistle my own songs now. Something about that confession made Yates's chest tighten. He thought about this young woman, alone and frightened, whistling into the night to hold on to courage, and he felt a fierce protective instinct rise up in him. It is a beautiful song, he said. Sad but beautiful, it suited the night. Thank you, Grace said, and he thought he heard a smile in her voice. What brings you to Silver Creek, Mr. Vaughn? Please call me Yates, he said. And I am looking for work. I heard the silver mines were hiring, and I have experience with that kind of labor. I have been drifting for a while, trying to find a place to settle down. Where are you from originally? Texas, Yates replied. Born and raised on a cattle ranch outside of Austin. My parents died of fever when I was 17, and the ranch got sold off to pay debts. I have been working my way around ever since, doing whatever jobs I could find. I am 26 now, and I am tired of drifting. I want to put down roots somewhere, build something of my own. That sounds like a good dream, Grace said softly. I hope you find what you are looking for. What about you? Yates asked. What were you planning to do once you got away from your stepfather? He felt her tense up again. I had not thought that far ahead, she admitted. I just knew I had to get away. I have no family except my stepfather and no money of my own. I suppose I will have to find work somewhere, maybe as a seamstress or a cook. I am good with a needle and I know my way around a kitchen. Mrs. Patterson might be able to help with that, Yates said. She knows everyone in town. If there is work to be had, she will know about it. They lapsed into silence again, but this time it felt more comfortable, less charged with fear and suspicion. As they rode, Yates found himself thinking about Grace Fairfield and her situation. He had seen plenty of injustice in his travels across the West, seen women treated as property and native people driven from their lands, seen Chinese railroad workers cheated out of their wages and black cowboys denied the respect they deserved. The world was full of cruelty and unfairness, but that did not mean a man had to accept it or contribute to it. If he could help this woman escape a fate she did not want, then he would do it gladly. The lights of Silver Creek came into view as they crested a low rise. The town was not large, maybe a few hundred people, but it had that bustling quality of a mining settlement. Even at this late hour, there were lamps burning in windows and the sound of a piano drifting from one of the saloons on the main street. Yates guided his horse through the quiet side streets to a neat white house with a picket fence and a sign out front that read, "Patterson Boarding House, clean rooms, good meals." He dismounted and then helped Grace down. Her legs were unsteady after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly. He caught her elbow to steady her. "Thank you," she murmured. And in the light spilling from the boarding house windows, he got his first good look at her face. She was pretty, with delicate features and large eyes that looked dark in the lamplight, though he could not tell their true color. But it was not her looks that struck him so much as the intelligence and determination he saw in her expression. This was not a woman who would be easily broken. He walked her up to the front door and knocked firmly. After a moment, he heard footsteps inside, and then the door opened to reveal a plump woman in her 50s with gray streaked hair pulled back in a bun and shrewd but kind eyes. "Yates Vaughn," she said with surprise. "I did not expect to see you back so soon. And who is this young lady?" "This is Miss Grace Fairfield," Yates said. "She needs a room and some help. Can we come in?" Mrs. Patterson's eyes sharpened as she looked from Yates to Grace and back again, taking in Grace's disheveled appearance and exhausted face. "Of course," she said immediately, stepping back. "Come in, both of you. I will put some coffee on." They followed her inside to a cozy parlor with comfortable furniture and warm rugs on the floor. Mrs. Patterson gestured for them to sit while she bustled off to the kitchen. Grace sank into an armchair as if her legs could no longer hold her, and Yates perched on the sofa across from her. "You are safe now," he told her gently. "Mrs. Patterson is a good woman. She will take care of you." Grace looked at him with those large, tired eyes. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "If you had not come along when you did, I do not know what would have happened to me out there." "Your whistle brought me to you," Yates said. "Like I said, seems like you needed finding, Mrs." Patterson returned with a tray holding 3 cups of coffee and a plate of cookies. She handed a cup to Grace first, who wrapped her hands around it gratefully, soaking in the warmth. Then she gave one to Yates and took one for herself before settling into another chair. "Now then," she said briskly, "tell me what is going on." Yates let Grace tell her story, watching as the young woman recounted her stepfather's attempt to force her into marriage and her escape. Mrs. Patterson's face grew stern as she listened, and when Grace finished, the older woman reached over and patted her hand. "You did the right thing, dear," she said firmly. "No woman should be forced into marriage against her will. You can stay here as long as you need. I have a room available on the 2nd floor. It is small but clean, and the rent is reasonable. As for payment, we will work something out. I could use help with the cooking and cleaning if you are willing to work for your keep until you get on your feet." Relief washed over Grace's face so completely that Yates felt his heart squeeze again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I will work hard, I promise. You will not regret helping me." "I am sure I will not," Mrs. Patterson said with a warm smile. She stood up. "Let me show you to your room. You look like you are about to fall over from exhaustion." Grace stood as well, picking up her small bag. She turned to Yates, and for a moment their eyes met and held. "Thank you, Yates," she said softly. "I will not forget what you did for me tonight." "It was nothing," he said, though they both knew it was not nothing at all. "Get some rest. I am sure everything will look better in the morning." Mrs. Patterson led Grace away, and Yates heard their footsteps going up the stairs. He sat there in the parlor for a few more minutes, finishing his coffee and thinking about the events of the evening. He had come to Silver Creek looking for work and a fresh start, and instead he had found a frightened young woman whistling in the dark. Life had a way of surprising a man sometimes. When Mrs. Patterson came back downstairs, she fixed him with that shrewd look again. "That was a good thing you did," she said, "bringing her here." "Could not very well leave her out there alone," Yates replied. "No, I suppose not, but many men would have." She paused. "What are your plans, Yates? Are you staying in Silver Creek?" "That depends on whether I can find work," he said. "I was planning to try the mines tomorrow." Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "The mines are always hiring, but it is hard, dangerous work. There might be other opportunities if you are interested. Tom Garrett, who runs the general store, is looking for someone to help with deliveries and heavy lifting, and the livery stable needs a new hand. The pay is not as good as the mines, but the work is steadier and safer." "I will keep that in mind," Yates said. "Thank you for the information and for taking in Miss Fairfield." "You are welcome here any time," Mrs. Patterson said. "And Yates, be careful. If her stepfather comes looking for her, there could be trouble." "I will be careful," Yates promised. He stood up and headed for the door. "Good night, Mrs. Patterson." "Good night, Yates." He walked back out into the cool night air and retrieved his horse from where he had tied it to the fence. He had rented a small room above the saloon when he first arrived in town 2 days ago, and he headed there now, his mind full of Grace Fairfield and her haunting whistle. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Yates woke early, as was his habit, and after washing up and shaving, he headed out to look for work. His first stop was the general store, where he found Tom Garrett, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a friendly face and shrewd eyes, unloading crates from a wagon. "Morning," Yates called out. "I heard you might be looking for help." Tom straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the morning chill. "That I am," he said, looking Yates up and down. "You looking for work?" "Yes, sir. I am strong, reliable, and I am not afraid of hard work. I can lift heavy loads and make deliveries, and I am good with horses if you need someone to drive your wagons." Tom nodded slowly. "What is your name?" "Yates Vaughn." "Where are you from?" "Yates Vaughn, Texas originally, but I have been working my way around for the past 9 years. I have done ranch work, mining, freight hauling, you name it." "Any law trouble?" "No, sir. I am honest and reliable. You can ask Mrs. Patterson at the boarding house. She will vouch for me." Tom smiled at that. "If Mary Patterson vouches for you, that is good enough for me. She is a fine judge of character." "All right, I can pay you $2 a day plus meals. You will work 6 days a week, Sundays off. How does that sound?" $2 a day was decent pay, not as much as the mines, but steadier and safer, like Mrs. Patterson had said. Yates stuck out his hand. "That sounds fair. When do I start?" "Right now, if you are ready," Tom said, shaking his hand. "I have got 3 more crates in this wagon that need to go inside, and then I need someone to make deliveries to the restaurants and hotels." Yates spent the rest of the morning working at the general store, and he found he liked Tom Garrett. The man was fair and straightforward, and he treated Yates with respect. By noon, Yates had made his deliveries and was heading back to the store when he passed the boarding house. On impulse, he turned in at the gate. Mrs. Patterson answered his knock, and her face brightened when she saw him. "Yates, come in. I assume you are looking for Miss Fairfield." "I just wanted to see how she is doing," Yates said, feeling suddenly awkward. "She is in the kitchen helping me prepare lunch. Come on back." He followed Mrs. Patterson through the house to the kitchen, where he found Grace standing at a large wooden table, kneading bread dough. She looked much better than she had the night before. Her hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and she wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Patterson must have loaned her. When she looked up and saw Yates, her face lit up with a smile that made something flip over in his chest. "Yates," she said warmly, "I did not expect to see you so soon. I was passing by and wanted to make sure you were settling in all right," he said, aware that both women were watching him with interest. "I am doing much better, thank you. Mrs. Patterson has been so kind. She is letting me work for my room and board, and she has already taught me 3 new recipes this morning." Grace's hands moved skillfully in the dough, and he could see flour dusted on her forearms. "I am glad to hear it," Yates said. "I found work myself this morning at the general store." "That is wonderful," Grace said, and she sounded genuinely pleased for him. "It seems like things are working out for both of us." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "Yates, why do not you stay for lunch? It is the least we can do to thank you for your help last night." "I would not want to impose," Yates started to say, but Grace interrupted him. "Please stay," she said, meeting his eyes. "I would like to hear more about your work, and you can tell me about Silver Creek. I know almost nothing about this town." So Yates stayed, and over a lunch of beef stew and fresh baked bread, he told Grace and Mrs. Patterson about his morning at the general store and his employer, Tom Garrett. Grace listened with genuine interest, asking questions and smiling at his descriptions of the more colorful customers he had encountered. In turn, Grace told him about her morning learning to bake bread and prepare meals for the boarding house guests. "I thought I knew how to cook," she said with a laugh, "but Mrs. Patterson is teaching me so much more. I had no idea there were so many tricks to getting bread just right." Yates found himself drawn to her laughter, to the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about learning something new. She had been so frightened and exhausted last night, but now he could see the real Grace underneath, smart and curious and full of life. After lunch, Yates reluctantly said goodbye and headed back to the general store. But that evening, when his work was done, he found himself walking past the boarding house again. This time, he saw Grace sitting on the front porch in the fading light, mending a dress. She looked up as he approached and smiled. "Good evening," she called out. "Are you done with work for the day?" "Yes," Yates said, stopping at the gate. "I saw you sitting here and thought I would say hello. I hope that is all right." "Of course it is," Grace said. She set down her mending. "Would you like to sit for a bit? The evening is so beautiful and I have been inside all day." Yates came through the gate and climbed the porch steps. He settled into the chair next to hers, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have been thinking about last night," Grace said quietly, "about how you found me. I was so frightened, Yates. I did not know what I was going to do. I just kept walking and whistling, trying to hold onto my courage, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying." "I am glad I was there," Yates said. "That song of yours, it really did guide me to you. I have never heard anything quite like it." Grace smiled. "I have been making up songs since I was a little girl. After my mother died, I felt so alone. My father remarried within a year, and my stepfather never wanted me around. I think I reminded him that my mother had loved someone else before him. He was not cruel exactly, just cold and indifferent, until he decided I was valuable as a bargaining chip. You deserved better than that," Yates said firmly. "You deserve to be loved and valued for who you are, not for what you can bring to a business deal." "Thank you for saying that," Grace said softly. "It means more than you know." They talked until the stars came out, trading stories about their lives and their dreams for the future. Yates told her about growing up on the ranch in Texas, about riding horses before he could walk and learning to rope cattle from his father. Grace told him about her childhood before her mother died, about learning to read from her mother's precious books and dreaming of seeing the world beyond her small town. As the weeks passed, this became their routine. Yates would work at the general store during the day, and in the evenings he would come by the boarding house to sit with Grace on the porch. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, and sometimes Grace would whistle her songs while Yates listened. He learned that she had dozens of melodies stored in her head, each one beautiful and unique, each one a piece of her heart given voice. Tom Garrett proved to be a good employer, and Yates quickly became indispensable at the general store. He was strong and reliable, always on time and willing to take on any task. Tom appreciated that, and after a month he raised Yates's pay to $2.50 a day. It was good money, enough to start saving toward the dream of having his own place someday. Grace thrived at the boarding house. She proved to be an excellent cook and housekeeper, and Mrs. Patterson came to rely on her more and more. The boarding house guests loved her, charmed by her warmth and her constant cheerful whistling as she went about her work. But the shadow of Grace's past hung over them. 2 weeks after Yates found her, a man came to Silver Creek asking questions about a young woman who had run away. His name was Harold Fairfield, and he was Grace's stepfather. Yates was making a delivery to the hotel when he overheard Harold talking to the hotel clerk. He was a tall, thin man with a sharp nose and cold eyes, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place in the dusty mining town. His voice was loud and imperious as he described Grace and demanded to know if anyone had seen her. Yates felt his jaw tighten with anger. He finished his delivery and then hurried back to the general store, where he found Tom behind the counter. "Tom, I need to take my lunch break early," Yates said urgently. "There is something I need to take care of." Tom looked at him with concern. "Is everything all right?" "I hope so," Yates said, "but Grace Fairfield's stepfather is in town and I need to warn her." Tom's eyes widened. "Go," he said immediately. "Take all the time you need. I will cover things here." Yates practically ran to the boarding house. He found Grace in the kitchen as usual, preparing vegetables for dinner. When she saw his face, her knife clattered to the cutting board. "What is wrong?" she asked, fear already creeping into her voice. "Your stepfather is in town," Yates said. "He is at the hotel right now asking questions about you." All the color drained from Grace's face. "No," she whispered. "No, he cannot be here. I thought I was safe. I thought I had gotten far enough away." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the kitchen doorway. "What is going on?" "Grace's stepfather is in town looking for her," Yates explained quickly. "We need to figure out what to do." Mrs. Patterson's face set in stern lines. "That man has no right to drag you back," she said to Grace. "You are a grown woman and you have made your choice. But legally, he might have some claim since you are unmarried and he is your guardian." "I will not go back," Grace said, and there was steel in her voice despite her fear. "I will run again if I have to. I will keep running until he can never find me." "You should not have to run," Yates said. An idea was forming in his mind, wild and impulsive, but it felt right. "Grace, there is another way. If you were married, he would have no legal claim on you. Your husband would be your guardian, not your stepfather." Grace stared at him. "But I am not married." "You could be," Yates said. His heart was pounding, but he pressed on. "Marry me, Grace. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I care about you. I care about you more than I have cared about anyone in a long time. Marry me, and your stepfather cannot touch you." The kitchen was completely silent. Grace stood frozen, her eyes huge, while Mrs. Patterson looked between them with an unreadable expression. "Yates," Grace said finally, her voice shaking. "I cannot ask you to do that. It would not be fair to you. You should marry someone you love, not out of obligation to protect me." Who says it is just obligation? Yates asked. He stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving her face. Grace, these past weeks getting to know you have been the happiest I have had in years. I look forward to seeing you every day. I think about you when we are apart. When I hear you whistle, it makes me feel like I am home. Maybe it is fast and maybe it is unconventional, but I am falling in love with you. Have been since I first heard that song of yours in the darkness. So I am not asking you to marry me just to protect you, though I will do that gladly. I am asking because I want to, because I want a future with you. Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. Are you sure? She whispered. Are you absolutely sure? I have never been more sure of anything, Yates said. He took her hands in his. Marry me, Grace. Let me guide you through this. Let me be the man who stands beside you. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Grace looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. I am falling in love with you too, she said softly. I tried not to, because I did not want to burden you with my troubles, but I could not help it. You are kind and good and brave, and yes, Yates Vaughn, I will marry you. Relief and joy flooded through Yates so powerfully that he felt dizzy. He squeezed her hands gently. We should do it today, he said. Before your stepfather finds you, is there a preacher in town, Mrs. Patterson? Mrs. Patterson had tears in her own eyes now. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Reverend Samuel Collins. His church is on the north end of town. But Yates, Grace, are you absolutely certain about this? Marriage is not something to enter into lightly. I am certain, Yates said. So am I, Grace added, and despite her tears, there was no hesitation in her voice. Then let us go see the Reverend, Mrs. Patterson said briskly, wiping her eyes. And quickly, before that horrible man finds you. They hurried through the streets of Silver Creek to the small white church where Reverend Collins ministered to his flock. They found him in his study, a kindly man in his 60s with white hair and gentle eyes. When they explained the situation, he listened carefully, his brow furrowed with concern. This is highly irregular, he said when they finished. Normally, I would insist on a longer courtship, time for you both to be sure of your feelings. Reverend, we are sure, Yates said firmly. And time is something we do not have. Grace is in danger of being forced back into a situation that is not just unpleasant but potentially harmful. I am asking you to trust that we know our own hearts. Reverend Collins looked at Grace. Child, is this truly what you want? You are not being coerced. No one is forcing me, Grace said clearly. I want this. I want to marry Yates. He is a good man, and I believe we can build a happy life together. The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Very well. If you are both certain, I will marry you, but I want you to promise me something. Promise me that you will work every day to make this marriage a true partnership, built on love and respect. Marriage is hard work, even under the best circumstances. You will need commitment and faith to make it work. I promise, Yates said. I promise too, Grace added. Then let us proceed, Reverend Collins said. He stood up and led them into the church proper, with Mrs. Patterson following as their witness. The afternoon sun streamed through the simple glass windows, painting the wooden pews in golden light. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Yates and Grace stood before the altar, holding hands, as Reverend Collins spoke the traditional words about love and commitment. When it came time for the vows, Yates looked into Grace's eyes and spoke from his heart. I, Yates Vaughn, take you, Grace Fairfield, to be my wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings. I promise to value your dreams as much as my own, and to build a life with you that brings us both joy. Your song guided me to you, and now I will guide you home. Grace's voice was steady despite her tears as she repeated her own vows. I, Grace Fairfield, take you, Yates Vaughn, to be my husband. I promise to love you, support you, and share both the burdens and the joys of life with you. I promise to be your partner and your friend, and to build a home with you filled with laughter and love. You found me in the darkness, and now I choose you in the light. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Yates leaned down and kissed Grace softly. It was their first kiss, sweet and tender and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. Mrs. Patterson hugged them both fiercely. "Congratulations," she said. "I am so happy for you both. Now let us get you back to the boarding house before anyone sees us. We need to make sure you have your marriage certificate as proof if Harold Fairfield comes calling." They hurried back through the streets, and as soon as they reached the boarding house, Reverend Collins wrote out the marriage certificate in his careful hand and signed it with a flourish. "Keep this safe," he told them. "It is your legal protection." Not 2 hours later, there was a loud knock on the boarding house door. Mrs. Patterson opened it to find Harold Fairfield standing on the porch with the town sheriff, a grizzled man named Dale Morrison, who Yates had met a few times at the general store. "I have reason to believe my stepdaughter is staying at this establishment," Harold said in his cold, imperious voice. "I demand to see her immediately." Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. "And what makes you think I am harboring runaways, Mr. Fairfield?" "Someone at the general store mentioned a young woman fitting her description working here," Harold said. His eyes were hard. "I want to see her now." "What seems to be the problem here?" Yates said, appearing behind Mrs. Patterson. Grace was safely upstairs in their room, but he wanted to handle this confrontation. Harold looked him up and down with contempt. "And who are you?" "I am Yates Vaughn," Yates said calmly, "and I am Grace's husband." The effect of those words was immediate. Harold's face went red, then white. "That is impossible," he spat. "Grace is unmarried. She is under my guardianship." "Not anymore," Yates said. He produced the marriage certificate and showed it to both Harold and Sheriff Morrison. "We were married this afternoon by Reverend Collins. As you can see, everything is legal and proper. Grace is my wife now, which means she is no longer under your guardianship, Mr. Fairfield. She is under mine, and I have no intention of letting you anywhere near her." Sheriff Morrison examined the certificate carefully, then nodded. "This looks legitimate to me," he said. "Mr. Fairfield, I am afraid you have no legal claim here. The lady is married now." Harold's face was twisted with rage. "This is absurd. She is a child who does not know her own mind. That marriage should be annulled." "Grace is 20 years old," Yates said, his voice hardening. "She is a grown woman fully capable of making her own decisions, and she chose to marry me. Now I am going to have to ask you to leave, Mr. Fairfield. You are not welcome here." "You will regret this," Harold hissed at Yates. "Both of you. Grace is a foolish, ungrateful girl, and you are a nobody trying to take advantage of her. This marriage will not last a year." "That is enough," Sheriff Morrison said firmly. "Mr. Fairfield, you need to leave now. You have no legal standing here." Harold glared at all of them, but there was nothing he could do. With a final venomous look, he turned and stalked away. Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat to Yates and Mrs. Patterson and followed Harold down the street, presumably to make sure he actually left town. Yates let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that could have gone worse." "You were magnificent," Mrs. Patterson said with approval. "Come on, let us go tell Grace she is safe." They found Grace upstairs in the room that was now officially hers and Yates's. She was sitting on the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale with anxiety. When Yates came through the door, she stood up quickly. "What happened?" she asked urgently. "He is gone," Yates said. "The sheriff sent him away. You are safe, Grace. You are truly safe now." Grace's knees seemed to give out and she sat back down heavily on the bed. "It is really over," she whispered. "It is really over," Yates confirmed. He sat down beside her and took her hand. "You never have to see him again if you do not want to. You are free." Grace turned to him, and the look in her eyes made Yates's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for everything. For finding me, for protecting me, for marrying me. I know this is not how you imagined your life going when you came to Silver Creek." "Maybe not," Yates admitted. "But I would not change a single thing. Well, maybe I would have punched your stepfather, but the sheriff probably would not have appreciated that." That startled a laugh out of Grace, watery but genuine. "No, probably not." She looked down at their joined hands. "Yates, I want you to know that I meant what I said during our vows. I know we married quickly and under unusual circumstances, but I want this marriage to be real. I want to build a life with you." "I want that too," Yates said. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently. "We will take it one day at a time, Grace. We will learn each other and grow together. There is no rush. We have the rest of our lives." That night, Yates slept on a pallet on the floor while Grace took the bed. It felt right to take things slowly, to let their relationship develop naturally despite the rushed wedding. They talked late into the night, getting to know each other better, sharing hopes and fears and dreams for the future. Over the next few months, their marriage deepened into something real and beautiful. They continued to live at the boarding house, where Yates and Grace both worked to pay their room and board while saving money toward their own place. Yates kept his job at the general store, and Tom Garrett proved to be not just an employer but a friend, offering advice and support as Yates navigated married life. Grace flourished. With the fear of her stepfather gone, she blossomed into the person she was meant to be. She was endlessly curious and eager to learn, and she threw herself into helping Mrs. Patterson run the boarding house. She also started taking and sewing and mending on the side, earning extra money that went into their savings. And every evening, no matter how tired they both were, Yates and Grace would sit together on the porch, and Grace would whistle her songs into the gathering dusk. Yates never grew tired of hearing them. Each melody was a gift, a piece of her heart shared with him. Their relationship grew intimate slowly, naturally, like a flower opening to the sun. The first time Yates kissed Grace with real passion, it was after they had been married for 2 months. They were sitting on the porch in the cool November evening, and Grace had just finished whistling a particularly beautiful song. When she stopped, Yates turned to her. "That was lovely," he said softly. "Thank you," Grace replied, smiling at him. "I made that one up today while I was working." "It is about finding home." "Have you found home?" Yates asked. Grace met his eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "I have. With you." Yates cupped her face in his hands and kissed her slowly and deeply. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard and Grace's eyes were shining. "I love you," Yates said. It was the first time either of them had said the word since their wedding day. "I love you so much, Grace." "I love you too," Grace whispered. "So very much." That night they made their marriage complete, coming together with tenderness and passion. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, one built on love and trust and genuine partnership. By the spring of 1879, they had saved enough money to start looking for their own place. Tom Garrett mentioned that there was a small house for sale on the edge of town, nothing fancy but solid and well built, with a garden plot and a shed that could be used as a workshop. The price was reasonable, and with their combined savings, they could afford it. They walked out to look at the house on a sunny April morning. It was indeed small, just 4 rooms, but it had good bones and a stone fireplace and windows that let in plenty of light. The garden was overgrown, but Grace walked through it with her hands clasped in delight, already planning what she would plant. "What do you think?" Yates asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I think it is perfect," Grace said, leaning back against him. "I can already see us here building a life, maybe adding on a room or two as we need them, planting vegetables and flowers, raising a family." "A family," Yates repeated, turning her around to face him. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Grace blushed. "Not yet," she said. "But someday, I hope. Do you want children, Yates?" "With you?" "Yes," Yates said. "I want everything with you." They bought the house the next week. Moving in felt like the final piece of their life together falling into place. They spent their evenings fixing up the house, painting the walls and mending the fence and making the garden presentable. Mrs. Patterson gave them some furniture from the boarding house, and Tom Garrett gave Yates a raise to $3 a day, which made their finances much more comfortable. Grace continued her sewing business from home, and word spread about her skill with a needle. Soon she had more work than she could handle, taking in everything from simple mending to creating beautiful dresses for the wives of Silver Creek's more prosperous citizens. Life was good. Life was better than Yates had ever imagined it could be. Every morning he woke up next to Grace, and every evening he came home to her smile and her whistling. They built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine love, and Yates thanked God every day for that night when he had heard a lonely whistle in the darkness and followed it to find his future. In the summer of 1879, Grace discovered she was expecting their first child. She told Yates one evening when he came home from work, her eyes bright with excitement and a little fear. "A baby," Yates repeated, stunned and thrilled in equal measure. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Grace asked anxiously. Yates swept her up in his arms and spun her around, making her shriek with laughter. "Happy? Grace, I am over the moon. This is the best news I have ever heard." They spent that evening making plans for the baby, talking about names and what changes they would need to make to the house. They decided to add on a room for the nursery, and Yates threw himself into the project with enthusiasm, working on it every evening after his job at the general store and on Sundays after church. Tom Garrett and Mrs. Patterson were thrilled by the news. Mrs. Patterson immediately began knitting baby clothes, and Tom slipped Yates a little extra money whenever he could, claiming it was a bonus for good work, but really wanting to help the young couple prepare for their new arrival. As Grace's pregnancy progressed, Yates became even more protective and attentive. He insisted she not overwork herself, though Grace laughed at his concern. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she told him. "I am not made of glass, Yates." "I know," he said. "But you are precious to me. You and this baby are everything. Let me fuss over you a little." "All right," Grace said, kissing him. "You can fuss, but only a little." In March of 1880, Grace went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Yates paced outside the bedroom where the midwife and Mrs. Patterson were attending to Grace, his heart in his throat every time he heard her cry out in pain. Finally, in the late afternoon, he heard a new sound, the thin, reedy wail of a newborn baby. The bedroom door opened and Mrs. Patterson emerged, her face tired but wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Yates," she said. "You have a son. A son." Yates felt his knees go weak with relief and joy. "Can I see them? Are they all right?" "They are both fine," Mrs. Patterson assured him. "Grace is exhausted, but she is strong and healthy. Come in and meet your boy." Yates entered the bedroom to find Grace propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were glowing as she looked down at the tiny bundle in her arms. When she saw Yates, she smiled. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Yates approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the baby. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Yates felt something crack open in his chest, a flood of love so intense it nearly knocked him over. "He is beautiful," Yates whispered. "You are both so beautiful." "Do you want to hold him?" Grace asked. Yates nodded, not trusting his voice. Grace placed the baby carefully in his arms, and Yates marveled at how small and light his son was, how fragile and perfect. The baby opened his eyes, dark and unfocused, and seemed to look right at Yates. "Hello, little one," Yates said. "I am your father. I am going to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. And your mother and I are going to give you the best life we can." "What should we name him?" Grace asked. They had discussed names before, but now looking at their son, Yates knew what felt right. "How about Matthew?" "Matthew Joseph Vaughn. Joseph was my father's name." "Matthew," Grace repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Matthew Joseph Vaughn. Welcome to the world, sweet boy." Little Matthew proved to be a good baby, healthy and strong. He had Grace's eyes and Yates's dark hair, and he grew quickly. Yates fell completely in love with his son, rushing home from work every day to spend time with him. He would hold Matthew while Grace cooked dinner, talking to him about his day and singing him the songs his own father had sung to him. Grace took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She was patient and loving, and she sang and whistled to Matthew constantly. By the time he was 6 months old, he would smile and coo whenever his mother whistled her beautiful melodies. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Yates continued to work at the general store, and Tom made him a partner in the business in 1881, acknowledging how essential he had become. Grace balanced motherhood with her sewing business, though she took on fewer projects now that she had Matthew to care for. They added onto the house again, creating more space for their growing family. And in 1882, Grace discovered she was expecting again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in early 1883 they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah Louise. Sarah was different from Matthew from the start. Where he had been calm and content, she was active and curious, always squirming and exploring. She had Grace's determination and Yates's stubborn streak, and from the moment she could toddle around, she was into everything. Grace laughed as she chased their daughter around the house. "She is going to keep us on our toes," she said to Yates. "Just like her mother," Yates replied with a grin. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Matthew grew into a thoughtful, gentle boy who loved books and learning. Sarah was his opposite, wild and adventurous, always coming home with scraped knees and dirt on her dress. They were fiercely devoted to each other, and watching them together filled Yates and Grace with joy. In 1885, Tom Garrett decided to retire, and he sold his share of the general store to Yates for a very reasonable price. "You have earned it," Tom told him. "You have turned this store into the most successful business in Silver Creek. I know it will be in good hands with you." Owning the general store gave the Vaughn family financial security and respect in the community. Yates hired help to manage the day-to-day operations while he focused on the bigger picture, expanding the inventory and negotiating better prices with suppliers. Grace continued her sewing, and together they built a comfortable, prosperous life. But it was not the money or the success that mattered most to them. It was the love they shared, the family they had built, the home they had created together. Every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, they would sit together on their porch, just as they had done at the boarding house all those years ago. Grace would whistle her songs into the twilight, and Yates would hold her hand and feel grateful for the path his life had taken. In 1886, they faced their first real challenge as a couple. A fire broke out in the business district of Silver Creek, and the general store was badly damaged. Yates stood in the smoking ruins the morning after the fire, looking at years of hard work reduced to charred wood and ash, and felt despair wash over him. Grace found him there, standing alone amid the destruction. She walked up and took his hand without saying anything at first. They stood together in silence for several minutes. Finally, Grace spoke. "We will rebuild," she said firmly. "We have done it before and we will do it again. This is just a building, Yates. What matters is still standing. You, me, Matthew, Sarah, our family. Everything else we can replace." Yates turned to look at his wife. She was 32 now, no longer the frightened young woman he had found whistling in the darkness 8 years ago. She was strong and confident, a full partner in every aspect of their lives. And she was right. "You are right," he said. "We will rebuild. Together." And they did. With the help of their friends and neighbors, they rebuilt the general store bigger and better than before. It took 6 months of hard work, but when they reopened in the spring of 1887, the new store was the pride of Silver Creek. The experience brought them even closer together. Yates came to rely on Grace's counsel in business matters, and he discovered that she had a sharp head for numbers and a good instinct for what customers wanted. They became true partners in every sense of the word, running the business together. Matthew turned 10 in 1890, and Sarah was 7. They were healthy, happy children who were growing up knowing they were loved and valued. Yates and Grace made sure to spend quality time with each of them, nurturing their individual interests and talents. Matthew loved to read and had announced that he wanted to be a teacher someday. Yates built him bookshelves in his room and bought him every book he could afford. Sarah loved horses and begged for riding lessons. Yates taught her himself, patiently showing her how to handle the gentle mare they kept for the family. In the evenings, the whole family would gather on the porch. Grace would whistle her songs, and gradually the children learned them too. Matthew had a good voice and would sometimes sing along, making up words to fit his mother's melodies. Sarah could not carry a tune to save her life, but she would dance to the music, twirling and spinning until she was dizzy. These were the moments Yates treasured most. His family together, safe and happy, making music and memories as the sun set over the Nevada desert. He thought back to that night in 1878 when he had been a lonely drifter, and he marveled at how much his life had changed. In 1891, Mrs. Patterson fell ill. She was in her 70s now, and the boarding house had become too much for her to manage on her own. Grace visited her every day, helping with the cooking and cleaning and just keeping the older woman company. "You have been such a blessing to me, Mrs. Patterson told Grace one afternoon as they sat together in the parlor. "From the moment Yates brought you to my door, I knew you were special, and watching you and Yates build your life together has been one of the great joys of my later years." "You saved my life," Grace said, taking her hand. "Both of you did. I do not know what would have happened to me if I had not found you that night." "You would have survived," Mrs. Patterson said with certainty. "You have steel in you, Grace Vaughn. You always have. But I am glad we could help ease your path." Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep in December of 1891. Grace grieved deeply for the woman who had been like a mother to her. The funeral was packed with people whose lives Mrs. Patterson had touched over the years, and Grace stood beside Yates with tears streaming down her face as Reverend Collins spoke about a life well lived in service to others. To honor Mrs. Patterson's memory, Grace and Yates bought the boarding house and continued to run it, keeping the same welcoming atmosphere that Mrs. Patterson had created. They hired a manager to handle the day-to-day operations, but Grace visited regularly to make sure everything was running smoothly. The years continued to pass. Matthew graduated from school at the top of his class in 1895 and announced his intention to go to the Teachers College in Carson City. Yates and Grace were immensely proud of him, even though it was hard to see their firstborn leave home. Sarah, now 12, showed no interest in school beyond the basics. She wanted to work with horses, and she had a natural gift for it. Yates started teaching her the finer points of horse training and breeding, thinking that maybe they could start a side business raising horses on the property behind their house. In 1896, Grace and Yates celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. They were both 40 now, their hair starting to show threads of silver, but their love was as strong as ever. They had weathered challenges and celebrated triumphs together, and through it all, their commitment to each other had never wavered. On their anniversary, Yates took Grace back to the spot where he had first found her, that outcropping of rocks outside Silver Creek, where she had been whistling in the darkness all those years ago. They rode out in the late afternoon, and as the sun began to set, they sat together on the same rocks. "You remember that night?" Yates asked, his arm around Grace's shoulders. "I will never forget it," Grace said softly. "I was so scared, so alone. And then I heard your horse and you appeared like a guardian angel. You saved me, Yates." "You saved me too," Yates said. "I was drifting before I met you, Grace. No purpose, no direction. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something meaningful. You gave me a home." "We gave each other a home," Grace corrected gently. She smiled up at him. "You told me once that my song guided you to me and you would guide me home. You kept that promise. But you know what? We guided each other. We built our home together." Yates kissed her softly. "Will you whistle for me?" he asked. "That song you were singing the night we met. I have not heard it in a long time." Grace nodded and pursed her lips. The melody that flowed out was older, richer than it had been 18 years ago, seasoned by time and experience. But it was still beautiful, still haunting, still full of emotion. And as Yates listened, he thought about the journey they had taken together and felt blessed beyond measure. When Grace finished, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Yates spoke again. "Grace Vaughn, I would marry you again right now if I could. I would choose you every single day for the rest of my life." "And I would choose you," Grace said, "every single day." They rode back to Silver Creek as the moon rose, back to their home and their children and the life they had built together. And in the years that followed, they continued to build and grow. Matthew became a teacher, returning to Silver Creek in 1898 to teach at the local school. He was beloved by his students, patient and kind like his father, with his mother's gift for seeing potential in people. In 1899, he married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth, who was the daughter of the town doctor. And in 1900, they made Yates and Grace grandparents for the first time with the birth of their son James. Sarah turned her passion for horses into a successful business, breeding and training horses that were sought after throughout Nevada. In 1902, she married a rancher named Daniel who shared her love of horses, and together they expanded the horse business until it was one of the most profitable operations in the region. Yates and Grace watched their children build their own lives with pride and joy. They continued to run the general store and the boarding house, pillars of the Silver Creek community. They were known for their fairness in business and their generosity to those in need. On summer evenings, the whole family would gather at Yates and Grace's house. The porch had been expanded over the years to accommodate everyone, and it would be filled with children and grandchildren. Grace would whistle her songs, and the whole family would join in, creating a symphony of voices and melodies that rang out across the desert. In 1903, As they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, Yates and Grace reflected on the journey they had taken together. They had faced challenges and overcome them. They had built a family and a legacy. They had loved each other through sickness and health, through good times and bad, exactly as they had promised all those years ago in the little white church. "You have any regrets?" Grace asked Yates one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. They were both 53 now, moving a little slower but still healthy and active. "Not a single one," Yates said honestly. "Except maybe that I did not find you sooner. What about you?" Grace smiled. "No regrets. My life did not start until that night I met you. Everything before was just waiting. You gave me freedom, love, a family, a home. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Yates corrected, echoing her words from years ago. As the years rolled on into the new century, Yates and Grace grew older together with grace and gratitude. They became the wise elders of their family, the ones everyone came to for advice and comfort. Their love story became legendary in Silver Creek, told and retold as an example of how love could flourish even in the hardest circumstances. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th anniversary. Their hair was fully silver now, and Yates's joints ached in the morning, but they still took their evening walks together, still sat on the porch while Grace whistled her songs. Matthew and Elizabeth had given them 3 more grandchildren, and Sarah and Daniel had 2. The house was always full of laughter and noise when the family gathered. Yates eventually handed over full control of the general store to Matthew in 1910, ready to retire and enjoy his remaining years. He and Grace spent their days tending their garden, visiting with friends, and spoiling their grandchildren. They traveled a bit, taking the train to San Francisco and even all the way to Chicago, marveling at how much the world had changed since their youth. But they always returned to Silver Creek, to the little house on the edge of town where they had built their life together. That was home. That would always be home. In the spring of 1915, Yates fell ill with pneumonia. At 65, he did not have the strength he once did, and despite the doctor's best efforts, he grew weaker. Grace never left his side, holding his hand and singing and whistling to him the way she had done for their children when they were sick. One evening, as the sun was setting and casting golden light through the bedroom window, Yates squeezed Grace's hand weakly. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Anything," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "Promise me you will keep whistling. Do not let the darkness take your music, and promise me you will find joy again. I do not want you to spend the rest of your life mourning. Live, Grace. Keep living and loving." "I promise," Grace whispered, "but I do not know how to do life without you." "Yes, you do," Yates said with a faint smile. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will find your way, and I will wait for you wherever I am going. When your time comes, I will be there, and we will never be apart again." "I love you," Grace said, her voice breaking. "I love you so much, Yates Vaughn." "I love you too," Yates said. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Your song guided me home." Those were his last words. He closed his eyes and went to sleep, and he never woke up. Grace sat beside him through the night, holding his hand and whistling their songs, saying goodbye to the man who had saved her and loved her and given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. The funeral was the largest Silver Creek had ever seen. Yates had touched countless lives during his years in the town, and people came from all over Nevada to pay their respects. Grace stood beside his grave with her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and she was comforted by the knowledge that Yates had died knowing he was loved and that his life had mattered. The first months after Yates's death were the hardest Grace had ever endured. She had lost her mother young, had escaped a controlling stepfather, had faced challenges and dangers, but nothing compared to the emptiness of life without Yates. The house felt too big and too quiet. The bed was too empty. She would turn to tell him something and remember all over again that he was gone. But she had made him a promise, and Grace Vaughn was not a woman who broke her promises. So she kept living. She visited with her children and grandchildren. She tended her garden. She continued to run the boarding house, finding purpose in providing a safe place for travelers and those in need, just as Mrs. Patterson had done for her all those years ago. And every evening, as the sun set, she would sit on the porch and whistle her songs into the gathering darkness. Sometimes Matthew or Sarah would join her. Sometimes the grandchildren would gather around. But even when she was alone, she whistled. It was her way of keeping Yates close, of remembering the night he had found her and all the years of love that followed. Grace lived for another 12 years after Yates's death. She saw more grandchildren born and even some great-grandchildren. She saw the world change in ways that would have been unimaginable in her youth, with automobiles and electric lights and airplanes. But through all the changes, she held on to the values and the love that she and Yates had built their life on. In the winter of 1927, at the age of 77, Grace felt her time coming to an end. She was not afraid. She had lived a full, rich life, had loved and been loved, had made a difference in her corner of the world. And she knew that Yates was waiting for her. On her last evening, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Grace asked them to help her outside onto the porch one final time. They wrapped her in blankets against the cold and settled her in her favorite chair. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. "Tell me," Grace said to her family gathered around her, "what will you remember most about me?" "Your strength," Matthew said immediately, "the way you never gave up no matter how hard things got." "Your kindness," Sarah added, "the way you always saw the best in people and helped them see it in themselves." "Your songs," one of the grandchildren said. "We will always remember your whistling." Grace smiled. "Good," she said softly. "Those are the things I want you to remember, but most of all, remember the love. Your grandfather and I built our life on love, and that is what endures. Everything else fades, but love remains." She asked them to be quiet then, and in the gathering twilight, Grace Fairfield Vaughn pursed her lips and whistled one last time. It was the same song she had been whistling that night 50 years ago when a lonely cowboy heard her in the darkness and followed the melody to find her. The song of loneliness and hope, of courage and love, of finding home in another person's heart. As the last notes faded into the cold night air, Grace closed her eyes. Her children saw the smile that crossed her face, peaceful and joyful, as if she was seeing something beautiful that they could not yet see. And then, quietly, she slipped away. They buried her beside Yates in the Silver Creek Cemetery, under a simple headstone that read, "Grace Fairfield Vaughn, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. Her song guided us all home." In the years that followed, the story of Yates and Grace became a cherished part of Silver Creek's history. Their descendants continued to live in the town, running the general store and the boarding house, raising horses and teaching children, carrying on the legacy of love and service that their grandparents had established. And on quiet evenings, if you listened carefully in certain parts of Silver Creek, old-timers would swear you could still hear a woman whistling a beautiful, haunting melody into the darkness. Some said it was just the wind. But others, the ones who believed in love that transcended death, said it was Grace, still singing her songs, still calling out into the night. And somewhere, they said, Yates was listening and smiling, forever grateful for the night her song had guided him home. The house that Yates and Grace built still stood on the edge of Silver Creek for many years, eventually becoming a historical landmark. Visitors would come to see where the legendary love story had unfolded, where two people who had started as strangers united by circumstance had built a love that lasted beyond death. They would stand on that porch where Grace had whistled her songs for over 50 years, and they would imagine the cowboy and his wife sitting there together, hand in hand, watching the sunset over the Nevada desert. And every year on the anniversary of that night in October 1878, when Yates first heard Grace whistling in the darkness, the descendants of Yates and Grace would gather at that spot outside town where it all began. They would bring their children and their grandchildren, and they would tell the story again. They would talk about courage and love, about how one act of kindness can change the course of a life, about how love can flourish even in the hardest circumstances. And then, as the sun set and the stars began to appear, they would whistle Grace's songs into the night, keeping her music alive, keeping the story alive, keeping the love alive for generations to come. The story of a woman whistling in the dark and a cowboy who followed that song to find his destiny, and how together they built something beautiful and enduring that would outlast them both. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh but beautiful landscape of the Old West. A story of two people who found each other when they most needed to be found, who chose each other every day, and who built a legacy of love that their descendants would carry forward into the future. It was proof that even in the darkest night, a song can guide us home, and that true love, once found, never truly ends but continues to ripple outward, touching lives and changing hearts for generations to come.